Come to order. Denise, will you please call the roll?
Lisa Fricke. Present. Patsy Co-Johns.
Present.
Rachel Wise.
Here.
John Witzel.
Here.
Molly O'Halloran.
Present.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Here.
Patrick McPherson.
Present.
Commissioner Bloomstead.
Present.
All present.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you very much. Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of the room on the south side of this door. Live web streaming will be available through the State Board of Education website. And may I remind you that board members to engage their microphones before speaking and return them off when they are done speaking. And please turn off your cell phones. Thank you. Commissioners, issues with the consent agenda, Commissioner?
Yeah, so I'll start just with the basics. If there's any items on the consent agenda, the pink form that you have, you can fill that out and give it to Scott. Yeah, Patrick.
Can I just say that, you know, on the contracts under $10,000 that you approve, could we possibly list the source of the funds in the future? You know, I think that would be just helpful to know whether it's a federal grant, whether it's state money, where it's coming from.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's good. I'll Ryan make a note of that. Thank you. So otherwise, if you have anything else that you want specific attention to, just let us know and we'll organize the right staff as well to address that. As far as the report on rules, which my computer went off, so I don't have that right in front of me here in just a second. You can see that attachment there. Maybe you can, but I can't yet, so. There we go. We have a few outstanding ones. So we have Rule 21 that are waiting, Rule 21 and Rule 24 waiting for approval by the Attorney General's office, and then some rules waiting approval from the governor and then ultimately Secretary of State as well. So Rule 71, 72, Rule 23, and Rule 15. So John, I was going to go ahead and provide a little bit of the general overview of the agenda, given some conversations in strategic planning. Is this the moment to do that, or should
Yes.
I wait? Yeah.
Proceed.
So I wanted to highlight a couple things because there were some important updates, I thought, from my perspective relative to topics on the agenda relative to items that include certainly our progress relative to the ESSA work and our ESSA plan, and also a little bit of update on kind of on our progress around the priority school work and kind of our next steps on that front as well. So first of all, from the ESSA plan work, just yesterday, staff and I were able to have a conversation with Jason Botel, who his title may have been changing over time, but essentially the Assistant Secretary for the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. We've had ongoing conversations with U.S. Department of Education staff regarding that plan, working on that. Our conversation with Mr. Botel was, I think, very productive in talking about what types of specific things that they believe that we needed within our plan to meet with their approval. Jason himself is the one who makes the recommendation to Secretary DeVos relative to a plan's approval status, and he was very encouraging on our efforts overall. I will tell you I'm on about a third of the states that are yet to be approved for our ESSA plan work as well. The types of conversations and topics that we've had have included how we number one would align to an annual classification process and how that system would ultimately work on an annualized basis, and we reaffirmed that. We had put that into our ESSA draft as of February, I want to say 6th, if that's the right date. And then also how we continue to look at the evidence-based analysis as part of our system, and that's unique and innovative. And we had the conversation about how they wanted to inspire innovative things and continue to do that. The evidence-based analysis itself gives us a chance to actually look at measures of school quality. And specifically within the law, it says that measures of school quality are things that can be included, and they they kind of put a list together within the law that included something to the effect of, for one instance anyway, of teacher engagement, right? So among the types of things, I think it really meets with the spirit of the law. Because it's unique, other states haven't done that. We continue to work with them around that particular point, and understand anyway that they'll have a few more questions on that, but I would anticipate, further work over the next couple of weeks on that. Like I said, we're not necessarily unique in the sense that we have about a third of the states that are waiting approval, and we'll continue to work on that front. So I don't know if you have any questions on that one before I dive into the next one. I'll go seeing none quickly so we can keep moving. The reality for us also, I reported to the committee around the priority school work. We've continued in dialogue there. I do anticipate on our agenda tomorrow that the Superintendent Dan Hazing will be here tomorrow for a conversation, for an opportunity to describe his concerns around how that process went, how that was reported in particular. I think it's really important. This is only the fourth time we've named a priority school, and this is the first time that a single priority school was named. And I think one of the realities is that the perspective of, and I think we have to be intentional always about thinking about what those impacts are at a community and a school level. And so I want you to be able to listen to the superintendent tomorrow in those conversations, to be able to take that in. I do think our last presentation, when folks go back and review what we were actually talking about, was really a pretty important part of our process of describing the types of things, but really our intentions around providing the types of support that help any of our schools that would improve. And I think in this case, that continues to be our intention. And so I highlighted both those things. I think the committee asked me to make sure I was able to report on that, and it seemed appropriate to do it during the commissioner's report. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Four, Board Priorities and Research.
I have no report.
Thank you, sir. Standing Committee reports. Patricia, please report on the Policy Committee.
The Policy Committee has one action item tomorrow. We have a resolution regarding John Gale and his retirement from being Secretary of State. And this will be presented to Mr. Gale at the beginning of tomorrow's business meeting. He has done a tremendous amount in working with our schools and civics education, so we want to honor him for that. We had one discussion item. We heard from two representatives from the Nebraska Brain Injury Alliance, and they were invited to discuss with the Policy Committee a possible model policy or position statement that the board could support. And so that discussion will continue. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Rachel, would you please report on the Legislative Committee?
Yes, I'm going to ask Brian to come up as well and participate in our report out. Brian will be reporting out on the activities and updates that have been occurring in this legislative session. The other item, we do not have action items, but the other item that was discussed is some planning for 2019. And we will come back, the Legislative Committee will come back next month with more detail and updates regarding some of our proposed plans for the remainder of 2018 and our priority listing for 2019. So with that, Brian, do you want to give an update on the recent activities?
Sure. Brian Halstead, Deputy Commissioner. For context, today was the 36th legislative day of a 60-day session, and they adjourned this morning and are not back until next Tuesday. So there are a number of things that are going to go on next week that impact everyone. The budget bill is required to be reported by the 40th legislative day, so many of you may have seen recent newspaper articles about preliminary recommendations and the Economic Forecast Board meeting yesterday, which all have an impact on the budget. So we are certainly waiting to see what they produce for the department's budget and everything else in that regard, but it appears a little more positive than when the session started in that regard. In the work session agenda is attached a 2-page document outlining all of the bills that you've taken positions on, where they're at the moment. There are not a lot of bills out at this point. There are many bills still in committee. We've reached the point of the session where every senator has identified a priority bill. All committees have identified their priority bills, and the speaker has identified speaker priority bills. So, like in past session, if a bill is not a priority bill, it's going to be difficult for that bill to get any discussion or move this session. But many of the bills that you did support, whether last session or earlier this session, some have moved. LB 1081, which was the omnibus bill that we put together that includes changes the board wanted for priority schools and for the progress plans being reviewed after a 3-year period of progress, is on general file as introduced, and it has a number of other pieces that the state boards legislative committee wanted done this session, and they are included in there. So that may come up for debate next week. I would tell you the next couple weeks are probably the critical weeks in this legislative session with the budget bill and any type of tax relief, whatever that might be, taking most of the time of the legislature. I can certainly go through bills or answer questions on any particular bills you have, but that's kind of where we're at. The legislative committee is going to be updated, and if there's a need for a conference call or anything, that'll occur when needed so that it can advise the commissioner and staff as to how to address anything that's going on. But at this point, that's largely where we're at the moment with the 105th legislature. And I'll stop there and see if anybody has questions.
Any questions? Thanks, Brian. Back to you, John.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I will report now on the Commissioner's Appraisal Committee meeting. We had a meeting this morning with the Commissioner, and for 2018 on the appraisal process, to make a long story short, I'll try to make this as short and sweet, but we're going to use half of the evaluations we have been using for the past couple of years, which were basically strictly subjective. The other half is going to be literally performance targets that we're going to be measuring the Commissioner with. And with that, we'll start using metrics from our strategic plan. To review the changes we're going to have, it'll be in Spark, so everybody will have access. And we're going to ask the Commissioner to discuss his 2 target areas that were defined this morning for him.
Yeah, and thanks, John, and actually thanks to the committee members. One of the realities, and I think we talked about this at the time that I was trying to do our annual reports, and it's the first time that we've had the strategic plan in place, and the importance of creating kind of a transition from how you've typically done an appraisal form since I've been here, which is only 4 years, so it's not that long of a track record, I guess, in that regard. But also the importance of really coming up with an approach that seems appropriate. So I thank the committee for that effort. What we talked about this morning was identifying a couple of these different performance targets that would actually kind of encapsulate two major themes that are aligned with the strategic plan. Certainly the strategic plan had identified certain things that the state board wanted to accomplish in the short term. A few of those goals were things to accomplish by the end of 2018 or by in the next couple of years anyway. So what I'll do is actually kind of and work with the committee to kind of finalize the language around what those performance targets would look like, essentially assemble the evidence that would be necessary to demonstrate that particular progress, and then allow you to be able to make comments based on that kind of compilation of it, rather than just simply going line by line of the strategic plan, which is somewhat one of the possible approaches they took. They said this compilation would actually make it come together as a package. The other part of this is really being thoughtful about my leadership abilities and the organizational changes, and having a description of that kind of performance target as well. And so obviously, as we've talked, there's been a lot of changes since we implemented and began to implement the strategic plan. And part of those changes, the specific even in the strategic plan itself, was to talk about making sure that the agency was organized to accomplish that particular work. And so I would report on both of those things aligned with this particular process, in addition to the reports that you've already had from me on those fronts. So that'll be the process. I don't know if you want to talk a little more about time frame or something.
Thank
I'll
you.
let you do that, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. In regards to time frame, we are going to get a package to all board members this month. And with this package, you'll get all the templates, score sheets, instructions in regards to how to work this procedure. Plus, also, we might even have some, if you will, exercises at our next board meeting in regards to simplify some of the reporting processes in regards to this, make sure everybody understands it. But the bottom line is we've got to have all the package of information to me by April. By April, I'll compile it, and at our May board meeting, we'll review and compile all the evaluations from all the sections. And board will discuss and review contract and proposals to the contract change in May. And lastly, in June, we'll finalize the evaluation and contract with the commissioner. But the bottom line is, in the next week or two, we'll be getting packages out to the board for the evaluation and appraisal. Thank you very much to the board members that are on the committee. Rachel, did you want to add something? I got to pat Rachel on the back for all her hard work in making this possible. That concludes my briefing. Any questions? Thank you very much. Maureen, please report on the AQuest Teaching and Learning Domain Committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. First off, I just want to thank the board members in the committee, Pat Tim, Rachel Wise, and Lisa Fricky, for all of their good questions and discussion, and the NDE staff for all their work that they do for us. I'm going to refer you to 3.4A.1, and for this discussion agenda item, Valerie Foy and Jeremy Henniger, they shared information about Nebraska's assessment system to us. The Nebraska Student-Centered Assessment System, NSCAS. Did I say that right? NSCAS? And they're going to share with you right now more about that so that you have a good understanding of it. And if you have any questions, please hold those off till afterwards.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're here to talk to you about the Nebraska Student-Centered Assessment System. We, a year ago, we came before you and brought a proposal for a contract with Northwest Evaluation Association for grades 3 through 8. You approved that. And so Jeremy and I are here to talk to you about what we've accomplished this year under that assessment contract and in working with our school districts. We want to give you a preview about some information just with the upcoming spring summative testing window. And then we're just going to introduce dates that we would like to return to you to discuss contracting for the upcoming year. So first of all, this Nebraska Student-Centered Assessment System is a system that has been developed. It was developed through the philosophy of the RFP, the AQuest system, the board's strategic planning, and our work with districts. And we really feel that it embodies Nebraska's holistic view of students. We think it'll give districts really timely, valuable information that they can use about student learning and help them prepare, of course, for a lifetime of success, because that is our goal always, to prepare these students for the future. This is pronounced NSCAS, so in a way it is like it looks if there were just a hyphen in there, and we determined not to do that, but it is said that way. So one of the things that we want to talk with you today as we present are the assessment types, and we also just want to talk about the philosophy of the development of this system. This is a quote from Dr. Brian Gaughan. Most educators agree that the balance must reflect the absolute importance of the support for learning over the simple measurement for accountability. And we certainly agree with that. We've always promoted a balanced system. We've had Check for Learning, which was a formative system for years, and we recognize that. But our educators wanted more, and they had really expressed that to us, that they wanted more. And we looked at the testing practices across the nation and at what different states had done. And we could actually give our educators more information by having longer and more in-depth summative tests. And we knew we didn't want to do that. We knew that's not what our educators wanted in the state of Nebraska. And we didn't think that it fit with the philosophy of what we were trying to do. And we also knew if we went to longer tests, not only would we use up more of the school instructional time, but it would make the results return to districts even slower than they had been. So we really made a decision not to go that direction, but instead to write this RFP and move toward a balanced assessment system that incorporated many types of assessment and supported use of data across the entire school year. So we were really looking for that balanced assessment. Now, part of that are just the different assessment types that we are included and being provided through this contract. And I'll let Jeremy talk to those.
Yes. So as we look at a balanced assessment system and what we can do, it's important to realize that the Department of Education by ourselves can't put into place a balanced assessment system. We can, there's parts that we have to take the lead on, like the summative assessment, of course, but there's also other parts that of the system that are district-based because of local control, local curriculum, and all of those pieces. So it's important to understand that at some level on some of these, we're simply providing supports to the work that's being done in districts and schools, and continuing to look for that. What supports can we offer to help them do the work that they're already doing? And so that first bullet up there, districts and schools already provide formative assessment resources. They do it teachers do that every day in their classrooms. So part of that is just recognizing that they already have a big role in that. So what resources can we provide and what supports can we provide? One of the big things that we're doing is partnering with NWA to supplement some of those resources. First of all is providing some professional learning around formative assessment. We have a series of certified facilitators that Valerie will talk about a little bit later, but those certified facilitators are providing professional learning around formative assessment, the use of setting goals and doing individual learning targets and those types of things. So working with NWA, we're working on that piece about professional learning. NWA also has some online year-round resources that are professional learning online for teachers that they can use and access, and some of those include toolkits for formative assessment as well. In addition, TestWiz, which is really replacing Check for Learning, what we've done in the past. Check for Learning is a online assessment tool that teachers, schools, districts can use to create formative assessments. As part of the contract, our schools have access to the Navigate item bank, which is a item bank that was created by a vendor, probably, and that's got about 70,000 items that are all aligned to Nebraska standards. And then also, in addition to that, the Check for Learning item bank has also been moved into there, and those are items that Nebraska teachers created. And so they have access to both of those item banks as they continue to work on those, including open-ended items and those types of things to try to get at some of the higher end level learning. But we're trying to support all of those pieces. And the last thing I'll say about formative assessment is the department continues to evaluate what other supports are needed, and recognizing that that's kind of our role in this arena, is providing support for that formative assessment. So we continue to evaluate what do we need to do. Are there other content areas, other grade levels that we can support on this? As far as the interim assessment goes, you are all probably familiar with MAP Growth. They did add that growth name to MAP in this last year from NWA. Most of our districts were already using that. Some over 80% were using that already. And as part of the contract in grades 3 through 8, we're providing that now to districts at no additional cost to the districts. And so MAP Growth is being used, so it can be administered up to 4 different times a year, fall, winter, spring, and summer, if districts choose to. And this isn't optional like most of these products that are resources. They are optional for districts if they want to use them or not. Of course, MAP Growth does a nice job of capturing growth within years and across years because of the RIT score, which is a even interval scale, so that schools, teachers, and students can see their growth across time within a year and across years, which a lot of districts really like, a lot of students really like, because they can set goals and see if they're on their targets to moving along. And it really is a tool and an assessment that it promotes growth and instructional improvement over time. So identify students' learning needs, set those goals, measure those, and then track your growth towards accomplishing those goals. So that's the interim assessment tool. Once again, districts use other tools besides this one that we provide, and we continue to look at other pieces as well. At some point here in the near future, we're going to come and talk about science and some of the things that after you adopted the science standards this last fall, some of that we're starting to think about a summative assessments or assessment system for science. Some of those things about how we support science for interim assessment, and those will be coming to you in the near future as well. So we're excited about those. So we continue to look at how do we support those types of assessment too. And then of course, the role that we're traditionally known for, even though we try to support all of those other pieces, is the summative assessment, right? So the NSCAS summative replaces NISA in grades 3 through 8. We believe, and we know where it's going to be a deeper and more precise insight into grade level performance, because this test is adaptive, like the MAP growth test. This test is adaptive, so as students get questions right, the questions will get harder. As students get questions wrong, they will get easier, but they stay within grade level. And so we're really challenging our top performers, and for students that are struggling, we're trying to find where they are. It'll be more precise over time. And this year it's minimally adaptive. It'll be more adaptive as we continue to build the item bank. And so we know that as well. That's also an engagement. If you're a struggling student and you know a lot of the questions are going to be so hard, it's hard to engage in that content. If you can engage and get some of that right, then we might find out better where those students are and target those. And they might have, we anticipate them having better testing experiences. And also that gives us better information on the backside too. So that's important all the way around. So also the nice thing about adaptive testing is it maximizes classroom time, because you can actually make shorter tests when you have adaptive tests, because it actually gets to their ability level sooner. And so Valerie's going to talk a little bit more about the summative piece here in a second. It's also important to note that we also have the NSCAS alternate available still for students in 3 through 8 and high school, which is for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, about 1% of our students. So there is that other assessment too. And it's also important for the summative that all those questions are aligned to Nebraska standards, right? So it's created directly for that. In addition, as you know, with this last year in setting cut scores for ACT, we have the NSCAS ACT because it's part of our system, right? It's a summative assessment for all high school juniors. It's really about college readiness, right? And whether students are on track for that, especially those cut scores that we set were that upper level was about, are students ready? Are they likely to succeed? And that other level, the second level, was whether students were likely to get access to school without needing remediation or additional courses and those types of things. So it's the summative assessment in English, language arts, math, and science. It's administered in the spring to all of our juniors. It provides more post-secondary opportunities for students. One of the things that we like very much, and I think families really appreciate this too, you probably heard this, is it's a free time for those families to take that ACT. They also can send their scores up to 4 post-secondary institutions like they always can when they take ACT, and that's at no cost to them as part of that as well. And it also brings increased rigor, relevance, and expectations for students across the system. I think that's you. Right.
Okay, So I would like to talk more in depth about the NSCAS summative. I'm sorry. Okay, thanks, I had to make sure it's on the right one. I want to talk more about the NSCAS summative, a little more in-depth information than Jeremy talked about. First of all, our Nebraska educators are the heart of our NSCAS summative test. They're the people who daily work with our students, who know what students know, what they can do, what they should be able to do, and how we can help them do that. So they are deeply involved in our item development. They participate in the standard setting so that we can bring recommendations to you and you can set those cut scores. They're involved in the development of achievement level descriptors, and they also perform bias review on all of the items, and independent bias review. So the passages, the items, they can't have been the writers of those in order to review them. So we have writers, we have developers, and we have reviewers to really create a well-rounded, good set of checkpoints on our system. In addition, we have other work being done by psychometricians so that we run a statewide test that is being reported all the way across the state about schools and districts. And we're very responsible for running a valid and reliable test. And so we also bring in a group of people to do an independent alignment study and psychometricians to run the validity and reliability statistics on all of these pieces. And those are those wonderful, like, 1,000-page technical reports that were presented to you in December, and I hope you've all read them because they're just fascinating. So that's our proof that we do that. I was sharing in our committee. Jeremy and I get regular contacts from people working on dissertations and doing research about questions about our technical reports, like where to find something. And so we send that information out to them. And we're always just directing them into those technical reports and how they can use them. So we obviously have very strong tests in this state. So our NSCAS summative will be a test that adapts dynamically based on the student's ability. So when students answer questions correctly, the level is moved up. When students do not answer questions correctly, the test engine adapts and starts giving them easier items. It does stay within grade level because it is a summative test at that grade level, so it does stay in grade level. But it really, and then the other thing about that is it really includes engaging test item types. So we're working on becoming even more innovative with our test item types, but even simple things like drag and drop or line matching where they drop pieces, why that should engage them more. But Jeremy and I went out and did a pilot with tablets 2 years ago, and we were just watching our students engage with these, and they really liked them. And so, you know, I mean, that's a plus, right? That they like to play with that. They'll take an item and see how it works too. Now, Jeremy's going to talk about practice tests, or did, but they do look at that. And then it challenges our top performers because they don't have to get the items that we already know 95% of the students can answer because their levels are higher than that. And also it engages our struggling learners who may have more trouble encountering those very, very difficult test items and may become frustrated and thus engage in the test less. And so it gives them items so they're not overwhelmed during the summative testing.
So the I'm sorry, you're fine.
Okay. It adjusts to the student's abilities, measuring more in less time. And so if students don't have to take the items that they're going to miss, we know that they will have to take fewer items. And so that will allow them to potentially finish these tests in less time. And so we're very hopeful about that piece. That'll also reduce testing time while giving us more accurate results about students. And then we have to set cut scores this year, but starting in 2019, we look for the results to be available shortly after the close of the testing window. So one of the goals of our districts, one of the things they asked us for are more timely results. And so we're really working on being able to provide those to them.
So one of the advantages of having NWA as our partner for the NSCAS summative test is the fact that map growth was already widely used across the state. Like we said, 95% of our districts are using that product already, and so it's the same platform. So students are going to be really used to the platform that this test is. They'll have a lot of experience in it. For students that didn't have that opportunity, we have practice tests and opportunities for them to make sure that they're familiar, because we never want a new platform to be the thing that gets in the way of a student. The nice thing also is that NWA's platform is very trusted. We're used to using it. It supports a large number, 40 million students test events each year, and so we know that we can trust that. One of the things that we also mentioned in the committee earlier is the fact that a lot of the tools that were being used previously on the NISA summative, we asked for as part of the RFP. Those weren't necessarily available in MAP Gross product, but because of the RFP and the request for those in the summative, those were developed and will be in the summative once again, and those are universal tools and some accommodations. The nice thing is that some of those will be available now on the MAP test in the future too, so that increases the tools and accessibility for that product as well, and as we move forward. So that's a good thing as well. We've done a lot of work this last year working with special education, EL people in the department and across districts to make sure that the supports and the accessibility for all students is there and vital. All students will be able to access this test either online or paper pencil, or that alternate test for the 1% of the students with those significant cognitive disabilities. And so we've made a lot of progress with that. That's always been a key pillar of what we did, but it continues to be true as we move forward as well. So just a timeline coming up here. Somebody woke me up today and actually reminded me that it was March, which is a scary, scary thing. Not because we're not ready. We are. Nobody get frightened. It's just coming quickly. The test window for NSCAS General and NSCAS Alternate is March 19th through April 27th. There is an additional week up to May 4th for makeup window on that test. And so that's 3 through 8 for the general, at 5 and 8 for the science. And then it also includes high school for the alternate as well. For ACT, the main paper pencil test date, which most of our districts will use, is April 3rd. The makeup date for that is April 24th. If districts choose to be online for the ACT, which a handful of our districts do, they have 6 days in between there that they can choose to test. So there's a little bit of flexibility there for those online schools. Also, we don't want to forget about ELPA 21, which is our English language proficiency test. That is a state run as well. Terry Schuster and Brooke David take care of most of that work for all of our K-12 EL students across the state, and that window is February 5th through March 16th, and that's coming to a close here very soon, and we try not to overlap those, but that's the window that's quickly approaching. As just a note about contracts, it seems like we're here already. It seems like we just did contracts, but that's how quickly the year goes, I believe. So we're just as a reminder, NSCAS General is with NWA, and a lot of those additional pieces we talked about are NSCAS Alternates with Data Recognition Corporation, or DRC, who we've been with, who had a strong partnership with for a number of years now, and then of course ACT at that 11th grade test. Kind of the contracts and when you can expect to see things. We're here doing an update in March. We'll be back with more specific information about contracts in April, and hopefully do action item for the board in May. So those are coming up, And then I'll let Valerie finish
Okay.
up talking about these last two
So I
pieces.
just want to talk a little bit about professional learning and messaging to wrap this up. So professional learning is a strong component of our system, and it is based, there are a number of ways in which professional learning is provided. So first of all, there are workshops being conducted throughout Nebraska by Nebraska certified facilitators. So within the NWEA contract, there was professional learning provided. So the department, NDE, has been working with NWEA to develop this professional learning that's being provided across the state. We have 65 certified facilitators. There, as a certified facilitator or more than, there's a certified facilitator in each ESU or more than one, so some of them have multiple. And then there are a number of certified facilitators that are in our larger districts, so they can provide their own professional development. And these certified facilitators go through training throughout the year. There are a number of days. It's an extended training. And then they go around and they do presentations for schools in their ESUs or for their own schools if they're a district leader. And the topics of those this year have been assessment literacy. So we're really building, capacity across the state in understanding balanced assessment, using data, et cetera, to improve student learning. So how can we get the most from our system? We're also, part of the workshops were on formative instructional practices. So again, we would not be providing most of the formative tools, but what we do want to support is teacher learning around that and effective formative assessments and effective use of formative assessments. And then the other topic that has been the focus this year has been applying MAP growth data. So our districts have been receiving, if they were taking MAP in former years, they've been getting that for a number of years. And we just want to assure through our practices that the data that comes from MAP growth, so if they're taking interim assessments throughout the year, then how do they use that to improve student learning? And so we've really been working on that too. Then in addition, there is year-round access to professional learning resources through NWEA that are excellent. Finally, I want to talk about messaging. So the assessment department has collaborated with departments across our own department all the time. We work with teaching and learning. We work with the data department, getting data out. We have all sorts of pieces. But this has been a really great learning experience and growth opportunity for us. And we've really been working with NWEA as our partner, and strongly with the communications department here in the Nebraska Department of Education. So I have to do a shout out to Katie Bieber here. And to develop these resources to really clarify messages and provide them out to districts so that they have materials where they can talk to their parents, talk to their teachers, present pieces to their local boards. And so those are the pieces that we've been about. We have anchor statements and key messages. You can see a list of them there. Those have gone out to districts. Districts are able to take those and use those as they will to meet their local district needs. And so we really think that's a powerful piece around this, is not only that we have a unified message and we're on focus here, but they're really helping spread the message and help our districts do that also. So those are the pieces that we wanted to present to you, just kind of update, because we are going to be coming in with contracts in the next couple of months.
Are there any questions from various board members? Lisa?
Jeremy, this morning you mentioned the summative test can be taken either with paper or online, and I just would like to mention what you said earlier, that the paper test isn't adaptive.
Right.
Like the online, and I had students that they only wanted to do paper, but it'd be more advantageous for them to take it online. So
we really tried to free free up the constraints around paper to make it so it was easier for students to take it online, and really encourage districts to move students, the majority of students online. There are some students that need paper pencil because of
Right.
accessibility,
Exactly.
disabilities, and those types of things, and so we really want to support those students. But we think it's advantageous for most of our students to be online and get that adaptive test.
And I thought that was interesting. I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to elaborate on that.
Absolutely.
Molly?
Since I'm not on teaching and learning, I had just a few basic questions. It seems to me this is a tremendous advantage for those schools that were already using the MAP assessment. But I'm a little bit confused because we have Nebraska standards and the NISA tests were in alignment with our standards. So NWEA MAPS is not really made just for Nebraska, but are we the only state that is using it for summative assessments?
We are actually using the MAP test for summative.
Yeah.
So the MAP test is aligned to Nebraska standards. So if there are items that are developed that don't align to Nebraska
Yeah.
standards, they don't come to Nebraska
good,
students. Okay,
good.
so that first of all. And then the summative test is totally separate from the MAP growth test.
Okay. And then the summative test that you are using, is it in alignment with the former NISA summative test?
Well,
Are some of the
it's
same-
yes, it's the exact same test design,
But adapted?
aligned to the college and career-ready standards.
Yeah, okay.
So our former ELA test from last year, our NISA
Yeah.
ELA, was the new test design aligned to college and career-ready standards.
Uh-huh.
And we just brought that test design right over into NWA. It's aligned with that
Yeah.
same test blueprint. The math test is not aligned to
Yeah.
the same blueprint as the former one, because that was on the legacy standards, and this is the year where we changed to college and career
Okay.
ready. But the blueprint was already developed by NDE and by our Nebraska educators, and NWA followed that. It's aligned to our Nebraska state standards. Science remains the same.
Yeah.
And
And just what I would say in general, and what we've told a lot of teachers is the content is very much the same from NISA to NSCAS. It's just enhanced by the adaptability and those types of pieces, and the fact that we continue to push the envelope as far as the rigor and getting to these college and career ready standards, right? That we're in a slow progression of transitioning. So all of the teacher created items from NISA have come into this system and continue to be used and continue to fuel where we're going. Teachers are still coming in and writing items for NSCAS now instead of NISA, but that's continuing on. So in a lot of ways, the content didn't change a whole lot except for the math because of the transition.
Yeah.
But it's a continuation. There's just some enhancements in the adaptability and those types.
All right, and then so when they're using some of our test items,
Absolutely.
then can NWEA MAPS, do they partially own those questions now, and can other states use our questions?
no, not our summative test questions,
Oh, that's
absolutely
interesting.
not.
Okay, I
Those
wondered, so
belong
we
to
own
us.
those.
We own those.
Okay, then just one briefly, then the ACT, however, is not normally made in alignment with Nebraska standards.
Right.
But did you add any of Nebraska questions to ACT? There was some conversation about adding some, did you?
Right, we did not augment the test, we
Yeah.
went with the ACT. There are a lot of reasons for that. It's
Yeah.
very expensive and very difficult
Yeah.
to do, so just let me say that.
Yeah.
But what we did instead is we've really done a lot of work about alignment between the Nebraska
Yeah.
standards and the ACT. So we're
Yeah.
developing materials right now, we're getting them into charts that are easily used by our high school teachers about how the the ACT tested items align
With
with our Nebraska
standards.
state standards, so that they're still getting information about those Nebraska state standards.
And then just one last question with equity and access. Those kids taking the ACT, we pay for one test, the junior year. And so, and there's also a brief part in the beginning where they do an inventory, talks about their interests and whether they're aligned to the workforce based on their traits. Do districts have a copy of that, or are they privy only to the student
No,
himself?
they get that information.
Ah, so that'll help with workforce development and post-secondary alignment as
Yep.
well. All right, well, thank you, pardon me for multiple questions.
Rachel?
And I'm gonna see if you can pull back up, I think it's page 7. Is that possible?
I will, just 1 second.
Okay.
I closed it, I was not.
Okay, it's just it's
Yeah,
nice
There you go.
visual. Nope, okay, it's on my 7. It's the dots, the formative assessment, the interim assessment.
I took it off.
Oh.
We were asked
You
to
tried
cut.
to-
Well, I was following here
I
instead
know,
of
I'm
there.
sorry.
We were trying to make it a little
That's
bit
such a
shorter from
good
the.
graphic,
Okay.
too.
Oh my
gosh.
It's actually. I
darn.
think it's in the one and.
It's in,
It's in
it's,
the
we
one
have
you
it, so
have,
everyone
yeah.
else, look in your
There.
file at
Yeah,
the
I
page,
saw
yeah,
that.
look at the dots. And the reason I think that's so important, and now it's hard for me to,
Sorry.
is that the formative assessment that you talked about, and that you talked about this morning, is really what districts are choosing to do. I mean, that's just a resource space, a system of support
Right.
that you're giving our schools across the state. And the Test Whiz Navigator, where's my other notes? What's it called? Navigator Item Bank.
Yeah, the item bank.
And the Check for Learning are just a part of those resources that are used for formative assessment. And so if there's a perception that we're testing all the time, that's a local school district making that choice to potentially use those tools in different kinds of ways. And I don't know, and I think what we talked about this morning is we're not proposing and recommending that they do lots of test prep with those item banks, that they're a resource to use to support their curriculum and assessment processes that are just good instruction at the point of time. And then the interim assessment in the little chart that no one else can see, but we saw, you pointed out that map growth might be used up to 4 times, but that most often it's used either 2 or 3 times. And again, that's an option by the schools. And I guess what I was gonna point out is that there's one orange dot on this great graphic that no one else sees, but we see, that shows that's really the only time that there's the state mandated testing. It's that summative process. But what you've done is created a broader system of support around assessment for our schools that go beyond the mandated element of the summative test. The other thing we talked about this morning that just I want to go back to a little bit from our committee discussion, and that's the concept of growth. And with the interim assessments that are used, it creates a new possibility for us to have a deeper discussion about how do we think about growth. Right now, we use our summative test. We create a growth measure out of that summative assessment. But this gives us an opportunity to maybe think differently about growth going forward, because many of our schools use the interim assessment of MAP as a real viable growth tool in their districts and in their schools. And so I think it gives us an opportunity to start to explore that in more depth. How might we look at growth and meaningful growth for our students and have that conversation in Nebraska about meaningful growth for students? So thank you for your presentation and the information you've shared today.
Great.
John, did you have a question?
Yes, ma'am, just a quick question, if I may. In regards to map growth, does this still have the feature, if I'm not mistaken, in regards to it can actually project or forecast a student's performance in the future just by what it has in its
Yes,
database?
it has a prediction, it can predict.
Could you explain a little bit on?
Oh, sure. They correlate the scores, so the new correlations will need to be done when we have new tests. So our ELA needs a new correlation developed, our new math one will need. But what it does is it takes the placement on the map growth and where that student is, and then it predicts what the student will get on the summative test at the end of the year. So it's a simple prediction mode there that it can do. In addition, it predicts at the 8th grade, and I don't know if grades below that, but at the 8th grade, what the student will get on the ACT. And so it uses the score and then by correlations predicts what the future test score on a summative would be.
Is that on all features of map growth?
Yes.
Okay.
That's amazing.
They'll like she said, they have to be redone because we have new
Got
state
it.
tests, and so they have to have those results before they can do the correlation.
Thank you.
But moving forward, they'll be there.
They were correlated to the legacy tests, but now we've moved to the college and career ready standards, so they're redoing the correlations.
Thank you.
That was exciting.
Rachel?
One more quick that I just had on my notes and then forgot to add, and that's, I just want to go back to the value-added prospect of what this is doing for our schools. And I think that's a piece that sometimes people don't realize a level of efficiency that can actually occur. And with moving to the NWA with our summative test and having schools have the opportunity for MAP growth at no cost to that school, no additional cost for those grades 3 through 8 is truly a level of efficiency across the state and a resource base for our schools. The same with the ACT, providing that is another great resource for our schools, in many cases with the ACT for our parents as well.
Matt?
Well, I just want to, number one, thank Valerie and Jeremy both for the amazing amount of work that has gone into this. I wanted to level set just a little bit. Remember, a year ago, we, for the first time, ran ACT as our state test, and we had otherwise just had a singular vendor to run our state assessment systems. We've developed what I would say is a pretty unique system, and credit to Valerie and Jeremy for juggling a whole bunch of these elements of contracts and relationships with vendors in different ways, including, I think it's unique with ACT, we actually have an embedded person there. The thoughtfulness of having that embedded in that particular contract was to credit them. I don't know which of them, but both of them, in whatever regard that happened to be, to think about how we built capacity for the agency to serve our schools and serve the state well. The same, I think, is true in our relationships and the development of the relationships with NWEA. We actually sat in here with broadly with staff and not just talking about what we're currently doing, but what the future of this work might also look like. So when we think about the possibilities of a relationship with vendors, I think that's a really unique thing. I don't know if that exists anywhere else in the country. I don't have a way to judge that. And yet at the same time, remember that we also still have DRC involved as our alternate assessment provider. And the importance of really being thoughtful about expanding our capacity without, I will actually tell you, we have fewer staff running this work, and it's probably because they're going 24/7, and we have to figure out how we ensure that we have the capacity to keep doing that work. But I just want you to know just how hard both Valerie and Jeremy work year-round relative to this, and other staff that are engaged in that. And I probably don't get to do these public thank yous very often, but I do thank both of them for their leadership and effort on this front. It wouldn't happen without them. So,
John?
Also, I'd like to add, thank you very much for your dedicated and hard work in regards to the recent Governor's Technical Advisory Council meeting a couple weeks ago in regards to, that was pretty extensive in regards to briefing assessments, both with our vendors and through the state. And if you'd like to mention a little bit about any of the results that you would like to share with us out of that conference.
Sure, out of the Technical
Yes, ma'am.
Advisory Committee. So there were, these are not named technical for no reason. The notebook, the attachment, we had to zip all the attachments, and if you run it hard copy, it's like
Oh
that
my
thick.
God.
Oh, think technical reports, okay? So as much as you enjoy those, you would enjoy a Technical Advisory Committee meeting.
Not.
So the work that we looked at there, I have a couple of pieces that I'll just try to really quickly do. One has to do with the test engine, and one has to do with the research studies. So we have 3 experts. We have Brian Gong, Chad Buckendahl, and Pete Goldschmidt on that. Then we have a school administrator, that's Cindy Gray from Elkhorn, and Linda Poole is a teacher from Papillion La Vista. So that's our group. And I want to talk about the test engine first. So we worked with NWEA, and they ran a simulation, or they shared the statistics from the simulation. So they, in less than a year, because we didn't start our contract till close to August, in less than a year, they've developed a test engine that took all our items, none of theirs. They didn't have any of these items before. And they built an engine that when a student gets one right, it moves that student up. When the student gets one wrong, it moves that student to a different place. And then it had to map it, so the test engine went out and found 3 items on this standard. 2 items on this standard, because it not only had to adjust to the student's ability, but a student's individual test had to meet the blueprint for every single one of those students when they finished that test. And that is an incredible, and our TAC was very impressed with the work that had been done. So I do want to say that. Then the other piece that we talked about there, we had many, but I wanted to bring this one more up, is what research studies do we need to do? So Dr. Bloomstead talked about how we have a unique system that we're putting together here. And we're really trying to build a system where MAP interim, that MAP growth test, not only predicts, but will help teachers say, what do I need to do for this student, and this student, if they are not predicted to pass this summative test? How do I adjust teaching for that student? And the MAP interim can be really valuable for that. But we need to do our research around these pieces. We need to know, you brought up, how can we get more about what we know about students and how we can adjust their learning. And so we built into the RFP, and with each year of the contract, we get 3 research studies. So we went to the TAC with a laundry list of these are all the possible ones we could do. TAC gave input, and we exited with suggestions for what we would do as our research studies that would be most valuable. I think not just in sharing information nationally, but more close to home. How can we do a better job for our students every day in our schools? And so we really guided our research studies. Thank you for that opportunity, John.
Patrick?
Well, I think everybody's congratulated for what you've accomplished and what we've done as a board and the administration has done here. But as we look forward, I just, and this is something that these tests aren't measuring, but at some point, we've got to deal with civics and social studies. And we you know, the legislature's got a bill out there right now that would have every school test on the citizenship test, which probably if you ask people on this board, they don't think that that's really an accurate determination of how those children are, you know, learning social studies and civics. And we're gonna be in the process in the next year or year and a half of developing our new social studies standards. But at some point, before it's legislated in some other way, I think this board needs to look at some way to assess student growth in those social studies areas, which obviously these 2 tests aren't doing. I understand that. But at some point, I think we need to find a way to do that. We think it's very important. I think there's not anybody here that doesn't think civics and social studies and knowing how our government functions is not important. But somehow, I think before it's legislated to us in some manner that may not be as effective or maybe even more onerous, we ought to find a way to start thinking along the line of how do we assess student growth in the area of social studies and civics.
Interesting.
Molly?
Sorry. In the wrong way. When you talked about your technical advisory committee meeting, it made me also think, you had the dots, we saw it on our handouts earlier. When teachers have professional growth training, does NWEA MAPS do any analytics on district performance? Like your district might not be addressing these types of subjects in
Yep.
your different
Yep,
measured areas.
absolutely.
And then they probably also can provide actual intervention for teachers too. There might be a teacher that has growth slumps every year. And so it comes back to this question, 2 things. Have you considered some sort of alignment with post-secondary to give additional information for teachers maybe that need support in their instruction? Number 1, and then number 2, I'm also wondering if you look at the students and their performance, if they are in a small community, a rural community with limited resources, if you are developing conversations around what resources can be tapped into as a state that actually support learning in the areas that are being tested. So 2 questions.
Okay, so are we tapping into the post-secondary?
Yeah, for the
to-
teaching, I mean, I wonder,
Okay.
are they actually teaching teachers to teach what we're
Okay,
requiring of our students?
Okay, perfect, thank you for that clarification. So, the test results in map growth can definitely give information about what students know as groups and what they don't know. So they can help highlight the areas that districts need to better align curriculum, to have better materials, or to provide professional development,
Yeah.
okay? Then because we also have access to that, I would have to say that we are also able, because we build our professional development. Each year, we meet with NWEA and we say, there's this much built in, what is going to best serve our state? And so we can also build in professional development in our professional learning that we're provided through certified facilitators to perhaps even meet content areas. And in fact, so I want to just add this point, we are looking at development of really valuable tasks, performance tasks for our professional learning next year. And so we don't want just multiple choice or even drag and drop and pieces like that. We want really valuable tasks that are being promoted in the classroom. So we are working at building this professional learning around it, and we really are trying to build this and be cognizant of a cross curriculum. Not just ELA, not just science, not just social studies, which wouldn't have even been there, but a cross curriculum to help promote valuable classroom experiences for students that will enhance their learning at the college and career ready, like preparedness, task oriented, and across curriculum.
Cool.
That's not a state test, so that's professional learning.
Rachel?
To pick up a little bit on Molly's train of thought here, I guess my question would be more around pre-service, teacher education. As I listen to all the work that you're providing in a system of support for assessment literacy in that in-service process, what's happening in the pre-service process, and is it something even in our regulatory processes around certification, is there areas that we need to enhance, given that we will be a state that has such an ability of assessment framework and supports that truly personalized learning is integrated in what we can do moving forward. And so is that something that we have looked at in our pre-service processes and certification processes?
So I think we have work to do that within, or have work to do on that within our department, so I would say that. But I would say this, we have worked with Teacher Cert here and the Reach Out to Post-Secondary to create lists of invites to our workshops, so that when we're doing professional learning, we're providing those opportunities to the post-secondary level. Instructors is who it's going to, so that we can include more of them. And it's a really good reminder that we will really try to be very cognizant and attentive to that, so.
Thank you, Maureen. Anything else, ma'am?
Well, I have one quick question. Just a clarification. It's an easy one, and I should know this, and I don't. The online test is timed? No, it's not timed. Oh,
The ACT is, excuse me. So the online grades 3 through 8 is not timed. The high school ACT test, whether it's paper, pencil, or online, is timed.
Okay, then that's where I got confused.
Yep.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Maureen. Anything else?
Mr. President, we are done.
Okay, Molly.
Thank you.
Molly, we're gonna take a
Johnny.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Gosh, I left that on. I know this was left out unintentionally this morning with the communications part that you talked about. You thanked Katie Bieber and David Jesperson,
Jesperson.
but today you forgot David.
Oh, okay,
So
sorry.
I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, no.
I saw you sitting back there and I thought, woohoo!
He put his name in the press release.
Thank you for all your hard work and your explanation today. It's very much appreciated.
Very good.
Thank you, Marie. And we're going to take a 10-minute break. The board's going to take a 10-minute break. Thank you. Please be back at 20 after. Molly, please report on the AQuest Student Success and Access Domain Committee meeting, please.
Okay, let's start out with positive partnerships, relationships, and student success. We have a discussion item on school security, and right now I'd like to invite Jolene Palmer to come up. In light of recent events across our country, as you all know, school security is a very important topic. Jolene?
And could I just say one introductory thing as well? Just I want to introduce Sherry Dawson, who's here in the room. Sherry works for HHS as the I don't know if I got the title right, Director of Systems of Care efforts. And so just recently we had some conversations about how we also do some additional alignment of that work. So I asked if she'd come and just kind of listen in on our conversations. And I'd also introduce Michelle Borg, who contracts with us. And I don't know if I actually work for Michelle Borg, come to think of it, on occasion, but Michelle does great work for us around students and systems involve students across the state and has done a lot of that work. So I just wanted to highlight they were both in the room for the conversation. Thanks, Jolene.
Good afternoon. The Nebraska Department of Education is actively engaged in keeping students safe at school. Even in light of recent events, school remains the safest place for kids to be. The information I'm about to share with you are the efforts that we are making as the Nebraska Department of Education to keep kids the most safe they can be in school. What I want to share with you is that we have already been doing a lot of prevention and moving in the direction of prevention and preparedness prior to the event that happened 2 weeks ago. I want to share with you the big picture of school safety that we are operating under because we have been collecting data from schools through school assessment or security assessments that were mandated by the Nebraska legislature back in 2014. And with that, we're seeing some trends that have developed this picture. One of those trends is that we have a lot of schools who have great practices in place. We love that, and we want to grow that. We also know that we are very crisis-oriented right now. And what I mean by that is we are ready if an event happens and ready to respond and recover. We need more efforts and more focus toward prevention and preparedness, meaning trying to thwart events or incidents before they ever happen. So our focus is shifting more toward prevention and preparedness. And as you can see, we want to look at what we can do pre-incident in every way we can. We want to beef up our safety plans, which we have been receiving this year from schools based on that same legislation back from 2014. We're analyzing that data right now. We have some great safety plans out there. We also have schools that need some support, and we'll be providing some support to them already next fall. We also have a need and see a need that we want to do threat assessment because what we know is if we can ward off, if we can be ahead of the game, we can prevent incidents from happening. I would tell you that many of the incidents that have happened could have been prevented if there was some threat assessment that had been taking place. So we are currently doing threat assessment training. As of yesterday, we have trained 85 districts in the state of Nebraska on threat assessment, which is about a third of our school districts. So we're excited about that. We have 2 more trainings scheduled for the summer, and we'll probably be doing 3 more in the fall. We will also have a leveling factor because we know, based on some of the feedback we've gotten from schools, that there's a few more things that they're wanting, and so we will respond to that. Also pre-incident is to have a standard response protocol where we are developing a language, a common language statewide, common language, common protocol, common signage, so that no matter where a student or a parent or a staff member is within the state of Nebraska in a school building, they would be able to respond to any type of incident. So we're doing standard response training, or standard response protocol training, as well as standard reunification method training, which is reunifying parents and students should an incident happen, that we have a way of reunifying parents and students to the right parent and the right student, so that we're not putting students in harm. Then comes on the visual, you'll see the rest of it is response and recovery. Again, that's somewhat the SRP, because of course if there is an incident, it would be during the incident that we would want students and staff to respond in the manner that they've been taught, as well as have a reunification that would be effective and as quick as it could be to get the right parents to the right students. And then the crisis response, where having incident command systems in place and moving out through the process of how do we respond to this, and then after that, how do we recover, providing mental health support and those kinds of things. So you can see that what this is built on is it's built on the standards that you all adopted back in 2016, I believe it was, so that we had a vision. And this further defines that vision, where we have prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. What we're currently doing and will continue to do is to encourage all schools in the state of Nebraska to use the I Love You Guys standard response protocol to develop that common language. We always, also in the standards that we have passed, in your board has passed, suggest 2 lockdown drills and 2 lockout drills every year, in addition to the required fire drills, tornado drills, and bus evacuation drills. We will continue to work the prevention and preparedness indicators that are in the standards, as well as we will continue to provide threat assessment training to teams across the state. We believe that is our strongest opportunity at this point to build capacity at the local level, so that they can determine what credible threats are and what actions and what interventions are needed to be taken. And the last focus that we're working toward is to work on a statewide reporting line of some kind of system, where there's an opportunity to call in, an opportunity to text in, an opportunity to email, whatever it might be, so that should there be some information that they have, that a student, a parent, a community member might have, that they could call and make that report anonymously, and be able to have that information go back to the community, so that that threat assessment team then can take some action to determine what the level of concern is with that particular threat. Those are our focuses. That's where we were. That's where we'll continue to be, because I feel we were ahead of the game before any incident in the last few weeks have happened. And I still go back and say school is still the safest place for kids. And we just want to ensure that we keep it that way. And so these are our efforts to get us there.
Okay, thank you, Jolene. I'm going to open this up to a few comments and questions. One thing I really wanted to encourage each of you board members to do, if you look on your agenda, and if anyone here in the audience or in the viewing audience cares about this, it's called iloveyouguys.org. Go to it, look at it. It's actually about protecting you, whether it's personal, in your home, in your schools. And Jolene Palmer, she is our safety security employee as in the singular. And Jolene, thank you so much. One thing I did also want to point out as a reflection of our earlier meeting is when she talked about protocol and threat assessment, that is really where the answer lies. And not just in our schools, but in our concerts and in our movie theaters. So it's really a wise way to be proactive and alert. Now, comments, board members? Pat?
Jolene, I think you are doing a great job with the resources that you have, as I think the department is. But, a couple things kind of come to mind here. We talk about every student, every day. And there was a president once that said the buck stops here. And I think the buck has to stop with this State Board of Education on this safety issue. I do not believe you're getting nearly you're not able to reach nearly the schools you should have reached by now. Not your fault. You don't have nearly the funds allocated to do this job. This is so important, and the legislature is going to have to help us, I believe, in this, and it's going to be hopefully part of our legislative plan for next year. But this is something that can't wait. This is something that, there are 1,000 school buildings in this state, and you've reached a third of them approximately. Somehow we've got to get the emphasis on getting to every one of those schools as quickly as possible. We've got to have the staff to do it. We've got to have the training to do it. And at this point, we're not doing it. That's not your fault. But somehow we've got to find I can't think of a more important goal for this board than making sure that every kid is safe every day when they go to school. And we're not doing the job. And we've got a real task ahead of us, and I hope that we, as a board, will find some way to work together, whether it's lobbying the legislature, and I don't like to spend money, and I know there's not money there. But if this is important to us, it ought to be important to the legislature in every school district in this state. And, we all know that there are school districts in this state that simply are not following the protocol, that need to follow the protocol, that don't think there's going to be a problem that's going to happen here. And that's the worst thing that can happen. So, enough for my lecture, but we've got to find a better way to do this.
Yes, Mom.
Thank you, Patrick. I can't agree more with you. And Jolene, you're doing a terrific job. A couple of things. Just since the Florida incident, I've heard more on the local news of schools reporting and schools having issues around violence. I didn't hear that before the Florida thing. So Florida has really brought the attention forward. Now that I've got that off my chest, when you have these trainings, how long are they? Are they day long, they half a day?
Are you talking threat assessment trainings?
Yes.
Or the standard response protocol trainings? We have.
The ones that you've
several.
had recently?
So the threat assessment trainings are 2 days in length for level 1. And then we will have leveling. We're already developing level 2, which will also be 2 days in length.
But you've only reached a third of the schools.
I would say in 1 month, that's pretty good.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you, yes. So these schools that have come to you, have they been schools that have been prepared for what they thought they had everything in place, or did they leave with new action plans, or what?
With the threat assessment training, what we're helping them to understand is that what happened in Florida could happen here. What we're trying to do is help them realize that we can prevent what happened there. Because there were a lot of opportunities for intervention prior to an incident. And somewhere along the line, that ball got dropped. We're trying to teach schools how to keep the ball in the air and get it taken care of before it drops. That's the purpose of the threat assessment training.
Thank you. One other question I have. Do schools report to NDE currently, or have they in the past, when they have had a threat to their school? Or that they've had to bring in a student, and
They do not.
is that going to be part of the protocol in the future so that we have some data?
That would be part of the board and whether or not you
Okay.
wanted to, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I just need to know that, yeah.
well, I mean, we don't know. I don't know the incidences that happen day to day, except from the news.
Yeah. And I've had some couple of personal experiences that
Thanks to
superintendents
David-
have shared with
Thanks
me.
to David, again, I know a lot more.
Yeah.
Because he's great with connecting with agencies.
We'll just go down the line, okay, go ahead.
Wow.
First of all, thank you for what you do. You know, it's really sad that schools have to deal with this, but it's essential. And I read a couple of articles in the newspaper where you're advertising that this training is going on, and it was front and center, and I think that's also good, that the public realizes that we're doing something. My question is, a little while back, something made me think of the question, what are schools wanting from you? What are they saying they need at this point?
They want a lot of support, actually. The threat assessment has come up multiple times, and that's partly why we're doing it. As well as our assessors are going to the schools, we are getting a lot of data from them and feedback from them as far as what kinds of things they're wanting. We're keeping a running list of what those are. I can't
Oh,
tell you
that's fine.
exactly what all of it. I can tell you what we're seeing in some of the things that way, but we're seeing some trends, and our hope is that we can go back in here in the near future and actually address those with the schools to help keep them as safe as we can.
Yeah, I just appreciate the threat training, because in talking to the superintendents in my district, one school is meeting once a week and analyzing all of their schools, the feedback that they're getting back from school buildings and teachers and students, and that's where that preventative piece lies. We have to be thinking in a proactive way so that this doesn't happen to any other school anywhere.
Right. And there are simple things that we continually work with schools. Lock your doors, exterior and interior. Check your visitors at the door. Make sure they check in, they check out. I mean, that's important. We need to know who's in our building, where they're at in the building, and what their purpose is in the building. And we need to know when they leave, because if there's a fire, you're still responsible for the person that's in the building.
Exactly.
So a lot of the things that we're asking schools to do are not rocket science, and they're
No.
also not cost induced. Very simple. We're asking them to put staff members at the point of entries in the doors as students enter during their day. If they have an open campus, and make sure somebody's there when they come back after lunch. Those are critical pieces that are not cost induced.
Exactly.
It doesn't cost anything.
Thank you.
Lisa, there's one other thing that was brought up in relationship to your question, and it has to do with Health and Human Services. A lot of times we have students that come maybe from toxic environments, or maybe have behavioral or mental health issues. And so by working with our partners, we can provide support and intervention for these troubled students before it reaches the crisis
Escalates,
zone.
yeah.
So I'm really glad that you're here. I think, and I really would hope that our schools perceive the security and safety, not just preventing the incident, but also helping to build and support the lives of our young children. Because every student, every day, these are people that are tremendous potential human resources themselves. So we don't want to get them out of our school. We don't want you here. You have a bad record. We'd rather provide that support and intervention at an earlier state where we can turn the tide of that life as well. Rachel.
Okay, Molly, and you just took a couple of the things I was gonna ask about. And, you know, Julian, again, I think you do a great job in this process, but the process is so comprehensive that we need to approach beyond school safety and really back to that process of what are the needs of some of our students and how do we think about prevention and intervention. And for the intervention, there are times kids have been identified with specific needs and whether the child has made threats, whether the child has problems with relationships and problem solving and all of those kinds of things. You mentioned that in the Florida incident that the ball had been dropped. And so I think it's important for us, how do we think about going forward, building that ball and that team? And again, we have support on that team in this process. But what systems do we need to put in place? You know, we are so isolated in our systems. Here's our school day, and these are the systems we have in place for the school day. And then everything that happens outside of that school day, we pretend it doesn't influence the school day, but it does. There's 24/7 influence on that happening in the school setting. Yet the school does not have responsibility 24/7 and doesn't have the resources or the opportunity to really have that impact. How do we create, at least in Nebraska, where we're a small state, that we should be able to create a system that's a dynamic system that's based on those collaborative relationships that says if we know that there's something happening outside of the system coming in, that we can report that here and something will happen. And that supports will be provided for those other 16, 17 hours a day and those other 3 months in the summer when the school doesn't have a direct impact. I think we often focus on the school day and focus on a school solution when this really has to be a community solution and a state solution that goes beyond the school for the supports for those kids that really need some support. So I think it would be, again, back to, you know, it's some of our responsibility to set that expectation forward. And I think that would be something that would be valuable to come back to the board. What are the strategies? What are the processes that can be put in place? So if I'm in a school environment and I'm working with a student who truly has some issues and challenges that are coming back in the school, but they're influenced by things outside of the school, how can I get support if I report and know that there's going to be some ongoing support? So we're a state that doesn't drop a ball on a kid and a family.
I do, again, want to reiterate one thing that Jolene had mentioned to us. This I Love You Guys is free, and it has tremendous links, and it also reiterates not just the prevention aspect, but the basic protocols. And I would just ask each of you, in your own framework, think about when, I mean, I'm older than a lot of you, but do you remember when you're young and they'd have the fire drills and even the little kindergartners would pick up their chairs or whatever and go outside? I really think it's excellent that you say there should be 2 experiences for security for each of those different ones, whether the threat is in the building and the threat's outside the building. Then it becomes a patterned, very calm response, not screaming and running, and it's very controlled. And I think that's what we want to do, is be proactive, get the protocols in place, and then make sure that threat assessment maybe is accelerated to make sure we get to our 244 districts. Okay, Patsy, your turn.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank Patrick for stepping up and passionately articulate what a lot of us were feeling and the urgency of education. I think there's been a lot of urgency around the United States with some solutions that I think might cause more problems in education, but definitely education will not cause more problems. And Jolene, I wanted to say to you that the most impressive thing to me about your presentation today was something that all educators know, and that's called protocol. Everything from ringing bells to go to your seat at this time, go here at this time. Teachers understand the importance of protocol. And I wanted you to repeat one thing that just struck to my heart the minute you said it and shocked me so much. And that was your example from Sandy Hook about the doors.
Oh, that once the killer made his entry into the building, which was shooting through a glass door, He tried 2 doors and they were locked, internal doors, and they were locked. He moved on to the next doors that were unlocked. So we know by protocol, up until maybe yesterday, depending on what all happened in Georgia yesterday, we know that there have not been any K-12 students injured or killed behind a locked classroom door. That's why we're asking for classroom doors to be locked.
And that's exactly why Patrick's speech is so important, because we need you out there as soon as possible saying that something as simple as that could save so many lives. I mean, there are obviously some things that we can do down the road that are more complex than that, but the power of what you said in that convinced me that we need to get busy and take ownership as a board of things like that.
Thank you very much. Pat or John?
Go ahead.
No comment. Okay, well then, thank you so much, Jolene. Yeah, an important subject and a very difficult time. All right, we're going to move right now to transitions, and we're going to, the action items about giving the commissioner the authority to approve contracts with several ESUs to provide assistive technology services. And Tobias is going to join us today and make this presentation. So go ahead, Tobias.
Good afternoon. My name is Tobias Orr with the Assistive Technology Partnership, or ATP. And what we're asking is to give the commissioner authority to grant these contracts. Currently, the program, for decades now, this program has been ran through grants, and a recent audit has shown us that we were doing it incorrectly. So we need to switch those grants over to contracts to make sure we're doing everything the way we're supposed to be.
Are there any questions? Yes, Rachel.
I have a question. Thank you, Tobias. And this question is a little bit of a bird walk, but not totally, because I, from a constituent, received some questions about this particular item. And the questions aren't really about the transition, because the transition from the grants to the contracts is just a step in the process. But the questions were really more about the future and where we're moving with the ATP project and the grant / soon-to-be contracts and the services that are provided. And what this constituent asked was some questions about the transition in the plan. These services are so important. The assistive technology services are critical for our kids, and particularly kids with disabilities who need different supports and technology resources and supports, communication devices, and all types of support. So can you just share a little bit of the transition that's happening and how that will ongoing benefit our students and families?
Sure. I guess to start off, the switching over to contracts actually has really nothing to do with the transition that's coming. This just happened to happen at the same time. So, but we are currently reorganizing the way this program will look next year. We've been looking at it, and right now the current model is very consultative heavy. So we have 5 specialists throughout the state that are all ESU employees that go out and do awareness activities, trainings, and teach families and individuals and school districts and school staff about assistive technology, its uses, things like that. They also do a lot of consultations, so one-on-one at an IEP meeting, at an IFSP meeting, and we've been looking at that and realized that's probably not the most effective model, just because of the size of the state. It's really unreasonable to expect 5 staff members to reach out to every single child out there that could benefit from assistive technology. So we're going more towards a capacity building model, doing a lot more trainings and awareness to really get the local staff up to speed on current assistive technology practices, equipment that's out there, really get it on the forefront of their mind. Our fear was really that while we were benefiting many students quite well, there was a lot of them that we weren't reaching, just because of the way the program was set up. We just don't feel was the most effective use of sped dollars.
So, in this particular constituent, felt that it was very effective in this particular area. So I guess, have you built into this process some assurances of long-term continuity? And I think one of the issues that are to me, kind of important in this arena is, do we have some processes that we're building in to ensure that the kids who really need ATP are receiving it? Because I would say that what you're talking about is the fact that we're maybe not in a spot in the state that we have a good statewide system of intervention and support for kids and families that would benefit from ATP. And it sounds like that model would move more in that direction. So do you have a structure in place that you're thinking about that will ensure in a check and balance so that schools are being, somewhat the IEP team is really looking at ATP supports as needed?
Our hope really with this new model is to do an even better job. So right now, we do trainings and we do awareness activities. We really like to see an increase in that, so that when an IEP team is looking at a particular student, the first thing that comes to mind is there assistive technology out there that would benefit this student? We've found, what we've seen is a lot of kids are using assistive technology, but the IEP team either A, didn't realize it was assistive technology, and what we do know is they did not write it into the IEP. There's been some spot audits of IFSPs across the state. We're not seeing AT written into that either. Now we know it's being used, it's just not being, I guess, addressed in the IFSP. So that's where we started really looking at, can we do a better job of training and awareness to make sure that AT really is considered in every case. The model itself won't look so much different than the way it is now. We would like to bring the administration in-house just for quality control purposes, but really we're going to be offering basically the same services. We'll still have, staff members that are very educated in assistive technology available for consultations, maybe not in person quite as much, but our hope really is that capacity building to get the local teams much more comfortable with assistive technology so that they can do it on their own without totally relying on us, but we'll still be there if a case comes along or if they do need further support.
If you have any metrics as you move forward that you can share, and maybe even have this as an item on the agenda at some point for all of us to better understand how many students are using what kinds of ATP pre this change, and then maybe do some reports of post change going forward, because I think I would support a goal of increased access, which is what I think I'm hearing. And I do think that's so important to increase the access, because the supports that are out there are amazing. The different kinds of resources that are out there that young people of all ages, birth on up, can be accessing. So thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I did want to also say, Tobias, this is the last year that is transitioning from the grants to this contract. But if you're going to access SPED dollars and they don't fully fund SPED, what happens if you need assistive technology and you don't have the SPED funds to get it, and now that this last year is over?
Well, the funding sources really are going to remain the same. It's just we're changing, going from grants to contracts is just changing the mechanism by how we're funneling.
But this is the only year for the contract, it's the last year, right?
No, next year we're still going to have a program. It just will look a little bit different than the current year. So in the past, we've always had grants, and we did make an announcement that we're not renewing our current grants, just to give the ESUs advance notice as much as possible that things will look different next year. We haven't completed putting together the new program, so we've not been able to announce what exactly it's going to look like and if we'll be putting contracts out. We do know of some that will most likely happen, but nothing is official yet.
Yeah, budget is always a huge issue, though, isn't it? And I don't know. I think I think the whole board agrees that the students that need assistive technology in order to function is so important. So let us know how we can support you, and we'll look for those metrics as you transition to your new program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, let's move now to educational opportunities and access. This is an action item, and Diane Stumer is here. We're going to talk about school improvement grant supplemental funds awards for 27-18, 18-19, and 19-20. All right, so there you go, Diane.
All right. Hi, I'm Diane Steamer. Yesterday I was a Federal Programs Administrator. Today I'm the Director of Student and School Support and Services, and I think I got that right. So, I'm gonna have to try to remember that new name, it'll take a little bit. I am here to ask for you to grant the commissioner approval, or grant him the authority to approve the SIG supplemental awards. And I want to just give you a little background on these awards. After the original school improvement grants were awarded, which you approved, NDE received additional SIG funds from the U.S. Department of Education. And also, some Nebraska projects had not spent all of their funds. Let me give you an example. If a school received $100,000 to use in a specific year, and they only spent $90,000 or $95,000, whatever they didn't spend came back into this pot of money. In the past, we would just award it with our new grants, but there will be no more new grants for this. So we are asking, we asked to have some supplemental funds, and we did this through a competitive process. All of the current projects, which are 7 of them, had the opportunity to submit applications. We received 5. We reviewed them, and 2 of them, we had enough money to fund 2 of them, or partial 2, I should say, because neither one of them got everything they were asking for. One of the things about this grant is, since its inception, we have required that over the period of the grant that their budgets decrease over the years to help them into transitioning into being able to sustain that grant without these additional dollars. So the 2 that we are asking you to support are Lincoln High School, and what they are planning to do with their additional funds would be an expansion of their SIG-funded success coaching, and the supplemental funding will allow Lincoln High School to maintain 10 of their coaches per year throughout the remainder of their 5-year grant. The other thing that Lincoln Public School or Lincoln High School is planning to do is having an on-site summer school. This is in addition to the summer school that is offered throughout the district that is held like at North Star and other places. So the implementation of a 6-week summer school that would be held at Lincoln High, offering strategically selected courses that will facilitate on-time graduation for those students. The other one that we are asking that you support is Umahoe Nation Elementary School, and they requested supplemental funding to support their guided reading program to help with more professional development, so they are being consistent from grade to grade with what they are offering in their guided reading. And they are also asking to increase their PLCs. They've got them in place, but they want to improve what they're doing, and through some training, that's what they hope to do. So.
Okay, any questions for Diane? Yes.
Diane, and I appreciate this. Do you have, or is it possible at some point to give us an update on how schools are doing with the SIG grants? In particularly, as we give those SIG grants, the intent would be for an improvement, school improvement and improvement in student achievement. And it would be nice to look at the data relative to, over the past couple of years, the schools that have received SIG grants, and how does it equate? Do we see any improvement trends in those schools with the SIG grants they've received? I think it's our responsibility as state board members to really be thinking about how we look at school improvement, how we look at strategies of success. And because so many of the schools that come forward use the funds for different kinds of activities, it would be good for us if we can learn from that. Are there some common activities? For example, I'll just pick Lincoln High and the summer school they're doing. If we have funded more summer school programs, do we see more schools with some increased student achievement that are investing their SIG grants in summer school, as an example?
Yeah,
but if you could kind of start to give us some information.
Yeah, I could certainly do that. You know, it's going to depend on what you're looking at. Now, we do have, with this grant, a requirement that we have an external evaluator each year, and we have had UNL do some research each year, and all of those are out on our website. But each year, the research looks a little different. You know, in the beginning, we had so few schools, and so to compare, and that's when Jody Eisernhagen was at the university, and she headed that up, and it's transitioned to different people over the years, but I can certainly see what I can glean for you.
And Maureen?
This is a simple question for you. Okay, so Lincoln was given 70,000 and the other 40,000. Now, is this for the 3-year period, or is this 70,000 and 40,000 for each year?
It's not for each year, it's total. And
Total.
they have the option of determining if they want to use it all in the first year or if they want to spread it out over the
Okay.
years.
Thank you.
Great question.
Any other questions? Okay, I was just gonna make kind of a comment that we brought up during our domain meeting. And do you remember a lot of those schools in No Child Left Behind that did the SIG grants? And once they were taken over, the turnaround schools fell back. They only worked as long as they were under the enforced direction. And I really like it the Nebraska way. And Diane Steamer's been around for a while. You've seen the change in the federal laws, and I really like that you've not just changed your title, but you've stayed with us, and I think your resiliency is admirable, especially when working with the federal government. And I did ask her if the SIG grants recipients were also working in alignment with our AQuest and our NEQuest. So I did want to reassure you that they are basing their SIG grants towards areas that we have shown as a priority investment.
Yeah. The ones that we
Yeah.
have awarded to this point were all under No Child Left Behind, so they had all of the things that
Turnaround.
the hoops they had to
Yeah.
jump through and all of the bells they needed to ring. They did have to choose one of the 3, it ended up being 5 models that they could choose from. The majority did choose the transformation model, which meant they replaced the principal. The only school that did something different was the one in Omaha, and I'd have to look and see which one that is. And they actually did the one where they replaced half of their staff. Other than that, they have all done the transition, all of the tier 1s. Now, tier 3s did not have to follow that model, and they did a variety of things as well.
So things are changing with ESSA. Well, thank you, and we'll look forward to further reports, and we appreciate your service. Yes, Matt?
Well, I just want to add on that point, because I want to tie one more connector together. So the end of No Child Left Behind is the beginning of ESSA as well. And so these funds will be dedicated in different ways relative to that alignment, true alignment to the rest of our ESSA plan and AQuest in that direction. So I think that's really important, because it does tie then to the expectations that we have for schools in a different way. So getting that alignment has been critical for our work.
And now in your new position, will you be working with us as our ESSA plan is approved and going forward?
A jack of all trades, I would say.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Diane. We'll go back now to the next point on our agenda. And, whoops, I've got to get back to it myself. All right. Okay, I got back to the wrong thing. Okay, I'm in the right one. All right. Educational opportunities and access. The next one is 3.5. It's to authorize a commissioner, and I did want to tell you the whole committee did approve all the previous presentations. The next action item is grant the commissioner the authority to enter a contract with the Nebraska Department of Labor, and we have Tiber here. And this is to accept federal grant resources to create collaborative workforce investment partners data system. Okay, Tibor.
All right, good afternoon. So I'm here to request that the board grant Commissioner authority to enter into a contract with Nebraska Department of Labor and to accept funds from a grant that was given to a Department of Labor. In 2016, the grant was given to devise a system to allow the workforce partners to devise a system to accommodate collaboration between the 4 main mandatory partners: Nebraska Department of Education, Adult Ed, Nebraska Vocational Rehabilitation, Department of Labor, and Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, to facilitate better use of resources for the displaced workers, and to eliminate redundancies and extra workflows for all these workforce partners. The system would be a secure system. We're working with Dean Folkers on needs with respect to the advisor system that Department of Education already uses.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be designed as a secure system. It would support our long-term cost reduction strategies. And
And one thing we did talk about at the meeting, this initially was proposed with the outside applicants with their RFPs,
Thank
and
you.
it would have been additional $200,000 a year, but with NDE being at the spearhead, we'll be able to prioritize our resources, share information securely, and then really support these students in all the partnership groups. And I really, Matt, isn't it true that with this investment in our data system, that we will also have an opportunity to model what it looks like for Department of Education to kind of lead the way with the data?
But I think it speaks kind of volumes for some of the working capacity and the recognition of our capacities that we've developed around data and systems and the trust level between the partners on WIOA generally. So, you know, actually we're really proud to be able to be in a position to be able to assist on that front. And we've had many different conversations that assist to build that capacity in the long run, but it's really about serving our VR clients, or certainly our adult basic ed clients, and then even clients and students underneath the rest of our system. So it's you know, probably what I'll call kind of a unique thing. I mean, us having VR underneath us anyway, and we're really looking at how we build those capacities together. So I think that's been a really good thing, and Tibor's been actually, Tibor just changed job titles too, but I won't get into that.
And excuse me, Tibor, not Tibor. So any questions for Tibor? All right, well, thank you so much. You did such an excellent job. We're all done with that. All right, and we again, the committee recommends granting Commissioner authority on each of these contracts. And I did want to share too that we will have some items related to early childhood education to come forward to the board in coming months. And this is the end of the Student Success Committee report.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you very much, ma'am. I'll report on the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. If I could have Bryce Wilson and Shane Ryan at the table, please. And the action item is to accept the 2017 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report Audit. So Bryce, did you want to give us a little rundown on the audit results?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Bryce Wilson, Director of Finance for the Department of Education, and Shane Ryan here with me, the Operations Officer and Budget Director. New title for there as well. So we have our annual CAFR audit, which is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report Audit. Basically, it's the financial statement audit for the department. It's an annual thing. We have every year. We just received the report, I guess about a month ago, so it's coming for you as our policy changed last year, where you now have the opportunity to adopt or approve, accept the, I guess where the term is accept the audit report. There were 5 items noted from the auditors. We would say, I guess my perception on all 5 of those is no major findings. They were mostly around just access and internal controls that we agreed with and will tighten up. There was just one finding that we weren't in agreement with, and it related to DDS and specifically how they set their rates, which are approved by the Social Security Administration. What they were doing was approved by the funding source, as well as the people that regulate that program. So that finding will go to the Social Security Administration. They'll have a chance to review it, and if they have any issues with it, they will make DDS aware of that, and DDS will immediately address those issues. We don't anticipate that to be the case because, again, they have already approved the fee structure and fee policy that DDS was using. So to us, not something we really think is going to be an issue.
Thank you, Bryce. Thank you very much for your hard work. Any questions of Bryce? If none, Shane, would you give us a little bit of a forecast on what you see for the appropriations?
Certainly. The Economic Forecasting Advisory Board met yesterday afternoon and added an additional $55 million to projected state general fund tax revenue receipts for the current year and upcoming year. Last Friday, the Appropriations Committee had a vote, and we anticipate them advancing a revised budget bill that will have a 2% reduction of our general funds for the current year, and also for the upcoming year, but that is better than the 4% reduction that they were forecasting for the upcoming year. The university, state college system, and community colleges had their 4% reduction in the upcoming year reduced down to 1%, noting their importance. But we would anticipate that we would have about a $300,000 shortfall in our operations budget in the upcoming year. Reduction, excuse me, not shortfall. But we have strategized on repurposing vacancies as they come up through attrition and finding increased efficiencies to help minimize that impact on the school system that we support.
Just to clarify, that's a $300,000 reduction this current fiscal year and a $300,000 reduction in the next fiscal year as well.
Very good. Thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Shane. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. And also, the committee did vote to approve the action item in regards to accepting the audit. Patricia, please report on the strategic planning performance and improvement committee meeting, please.
Well, at the beginning of the meeting, the commissioner gave my report and did a wonderful job. No, so I have to say it again?
Yeah, say it again.
All right. At the beginning of the meeting, the commissioner gave my report and did a wonderful job.
All righty. With that, thank you very much, Patricia. We will now have an opportunity for board members to provide a very brief report on recent meetings they have attended since the January board meeting. If you have nothing to report, feel free to pass. And it looks like our first one was the Braille Challenge orientation. Who was able to attend? Go ahead, Pat.
Well, this was one that I haven't been able to attend in the past, and it was I was there for the kickoff of the national contest, and I got a guided tour of the facility. You know, one of the things I guess I was unaware of that I learned was that most of these kids, you know, when you go down there, you think Braille, you think they're just blind, they just got blindness or sight problems. But most of these children have 2 or more real learning issues, and so that was very helpful to me, and I got a chance to actually sit in on a couple of sessions with the parents, and that was very interesting to see what kind of training they were getting and what kind of opportunity they were getting to interact. So
Thank you very much, Patrick.
a day well spent.
Yeah. Anything to add by any other members? If not, let's discuss the NERCS Legislative Forum on 20 February. I believe Pat, I, and Patsy attended the forum. Patsy, did you want to comment on it?
Sure. I think that probably the best thing about that meeting for me, besides meeting all of the people from the smaller schools, a lot of them that I knew before, was that I sat beside one of my former students from like 30 years ago, who's now the president of the Board of Education at her school.
Oh, wow.
And what I thought was absolutely amazing about that is that as we went through the meeting, she would share her ideas, and then I'd share my ideas back and forth, and just to see how much she had developed and the concerns she had for her school system and everything that's going on now in education. We shared those, and little did I know when she was a scraggly little 9th grader that someday she would be advising me, and very wise for sure.
Very good. In regards to the Nebraska Association of Gifted Conference.
Can I finish on nursing?
Sure.
Oh, okay. I took quite a few notes there, but what was interesting was, first of all, again, learning. You know, they represent everyone from the smallest school districts. Their biggest one is Schuyler, incidentally, with 2,000 students. I thought that was interesting. You can see where their orientation comes from, because there are 176 unequalized school districts in this state. 94% of the TIOSA money goes to the 24 largest school districts.
Okay.
So again, you obviously see where they're coming from, being on maybe the short end, certainly in their mind. There were a number of senators that spoke. Senator Colderman spoke about the OPS pension and wanted to indicate that he wanted, there was a desire to help OPS on this, but not to mingle it with the state. They'll do whatever they can to help with OPS. Senator Friesen discussed his bill, and I thought it was interesting that there was a lot of discussion about the tax bills, and he said if none of those tax bills advanced, or if LB 1103 didn't advance, he would actually sign the petition and vote for the petition language if it goes on the ballot in the fall. And I think there's real concern that that's very much going to happen. So that was interesting. Let's see, Senator Breezy talked a little, was there. Senator Groney was supposed to give an introductory speech, but he was busy working with the speaker to pick out a couple priority bills. Later on for the lunch, Senator Linehan showed up, Senator McAllister showed up, Senator Brosh was there. They weren't on the speaking agenda. Senator Scheer, the speaker came and spoke to us toward the end, and you could tell he was very frustrated with the tax relief bills. He basically, I hope I'm not talking out of school, but he said it public. He said, you got 3 bills here, and each bill's got 5 real strong supporters, and nobody's going to vote for anybody else's bill. And I think that's probably the reason that very little is going to be done. And then last, we had a speaker from Open Sky Policy, and then Bryce Wilson and Jen Udeman from NDE made a great presentation. I thought they did a really good job. So
Thank you, Patrick. Anybody else have any? Mo? Molly? Lisa?
Just enjoyed the gifted 2 days, and Andy McNair said, as educators, we must engage and empower today's learners with skills, the 4 C's and 1 R. In every lesson, have collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking, and reflection to prepare them for future experiences. I thought it was pretty good.
Rachel?
And just real quick, I was fortunate to sit in a meeting with the Commissioner and with John Witzel, Terry Ronhorst from NROC, and the ACT rep, Rob Dennis from ACT, talking about the transition of a tool called Ed Ready that we've talked about before with ACT, and it's been renamed or rebranded as College Ready, and the real exciting opportunities that tool will support students in Nebraska. So I think that's just a real positive partnership between NROC, the National Repository of Online Curriculum, ACT, and that it will certainly benefit not just students in Nebraska, post-secondary as well, so benefit Nebraskans.
Thank you, Rachel. Patsy?
Yeah, I thought it'd be fun for you to know all the schools that I've been in this month, because it goes from what was once upon a time the largest school to some of the very tiniest. But this month I was in Beatrice, Omaha Skutt, Bartley, Lincoln High, Nebraska City, and Meridian.
All right. Well, thank you.
Meridian.
Thank you,
Went all the
Patsy.
way to Meridian.
Thank you, Patsy.
Yeah.
Patricia?
I'm fine.
Can I go back?
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to throw in, I wasn't as a board member, but I just want to remind our board members and those that are watching that 2 weekends ago was state wrestling meet. This weekend is girls basketball. Next weekend is boys basketball. And I just want to commend the commitment of the coaches, the school districts to get students there, the commitment of our students. We have such excelling students that work so hard, and coaches that work overtime, and I'm just so proud of our schools.
Do you have something else to add to that?
Yeah, I want to go back to the NAG conference. and Andy McNair, and a couple of the things she said I thought were, first of all, she gave me a new vocabulary. Generation Z, which are our kids that grew up since 2001. And, you know, she talked about the fact that their sense of learning is so different than ours because it's based on this. And she's saying that basically when you're teaching, you got about 8 seconds to catch their attention and get them involved. And I thought that was really important. And then she talked about the fact that especially with the gifted, they need to have an opportunity to fail. And they don't often get that in their K through 8th grade or K through 12. And then when they fail on something, once they get into college, it's a disaster for them. It's a meltdown. So I thought that was also interesting. One of the things I want to pass around, and I brought this last year, was the Nebraska Now program. And we talk a little bit about distance education and a repository. But there are some really interesting things in here. If you look at, just read the first few lines on the inside page. Most Nebraska Now classes are offered at a flat rate of $250 for a 3-credit-hour class. That same class as a regular student would cost $712.50. Additionally, if you earn at least a 3-point GPA in your Nebraska Now classes, you'll be eligible for at least a $1,000 merit-based scholarship to attend Nebraska. And they offer Nebraska Now, AP, and dual credit classes. And
Well, thank you, Patrick. We're very, very grateful for the information. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes?
I have a couple of special offers coming to you right here at the state board meeting. I met a person at the NAG meeting who has written a musical, and you that are all interested in civic readiness. This musical is about the Star Spangled Banner and how it was created. And it's really quite good. And she gave me 3 copies of it and said, take it to the school board and say, there are many of us in Nebraska who are civic ready, and not only one of our students, but our communities civic ready. And then we all got a letter from a gentleman about financial literacy this month. And so just boom, right then, I got an invitation from Lincoln High for all school board members on March 22nd. If you would like to join them, just talk to me. It starts at 9 in the morning, and it starts with a rock band, and then this group leads into the economic literacy or financial literacy part of the program. And if you look online at Lincoln High, you can see all the places that this group has been, and it was recommended by Jennifer Davidson, who I understand is pretty well respected in Nebraska as far as financial literacy.
John, before you cut me off, I wanted to say.
Well, you kind of deserved it, Pat.
You did cut me off. Before you cut me off, I wanted to say that those credits are transferable to virtually any of the Big Ten conference schools. So there's a real opportunity here for kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for all the information. I'll be very brief. I went to several stakeholder engagements during this month, and I want to thank them for allowing me to attend and share information with them. So thank you all.
I still have one more.
Thank you, everyone. Now we will start the individual reports. If you have nothing further to report, feel free to pass. Tomorrow, we will vote on a request to approve attendance at meetings that took place in the past and were not previously approved. There was one meeting approval request. The requests for future meetings attendance travel from board members are linked in the SPARK meetings. If you have any additional travel requests to be approved, please complete the state board travel request form in your board folder and submit them to Laura or Ryan before tomorrow. Tomorrow, we approve the board request for meeting attendance. The monthly board travel expense report is attached in the Spark meeting for your review. With that, the regularly scheduled meeting of the State Board of Education will convene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in this room. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.